Hello, hello. So we are now going to be reading chapter 12. So you will be reading chapter 12 over the next 2 days, but I'm going to read the whole of the chapter for you today. War. What is it good for? That's what this chapter is called. Joe held the phone to his ear. Hello, Prime Minister, a voice crackled from the other end. Yes, I am the President of East Transylvania, and you have a lot to answer for. I do, said Joe, somewhat taken aback. Yes, we saw you on the news with all your of seizing the day. Well, the silly lot in the West Transylvania have done more than seize the day. They have seized our land. You got us into this, now you have to get us out, or it's war. And with that, the phone went dead. The government in East Transylvania is on the verge of war with West Transylvania, and they're saying it's your fault, Jenkins said, rubbing his hand through his hair as he read a newspaper report from his phone. There's a set of mountains, well, one mountain really, that they are both saying is theirs. It seems they were watching you on the news talking about how one should live for the moment and decided to take matters into their own hands. If they start a war with each other, they'll only get everyone else involved, and before you know it, World War III. Well, I guess you're right. I'll have to fix things and do whatever it takes to stop the war. I mean, I'm the Prime Minister. That is the kind of stuff I'm supposed to do, isn't it? Said Joe uncertainly. Very well. We leave for West Transylvania right away. Jenkins put his hands on Joe's shoulders and looked into his eyes. I believe you, PM. The others will meet us at the airport. I believe in you, PM. The others will meet us at the airport. Others? Joe said. Well, you didn't expect to go on holiday without taking your old mother, did you? 14 hours, and I was in labour with him, and this is how he repays me. Joe's mum was yelling at the top of her voice in front of a packed airport terminal. Joe's mum was always reminding him about how long it had taken for him to be born. Joe wasn't quite sure how he was supposed to respond to this. Should he apologise? Promise not to do it again? In the end, he took to saying nothing and smiling. No, it's lovely to have you here, Mum. It was a surprise, that's all. And it's not a holiday, it's a summit. Joe smiled, giving Jenkins a nod. Summit? Jenkins emphasised. Oh yes, one of those. AJ, Joe, Jenkins and Joe's mum walked through a special entrance at the side of the terminal and across the tarmac of the runway towards a small but smart-looking private jet. Hope you like your plane, sir, Jenkins said as they climbed aboard. We added the modifications you requested. It was an amazing sight. It had a real log-burning fire in it for starters, a library, a ping-pong table, obviously, a big screen TV, even more, obviously. The normal plane seats had been replaced by sofas, and there was a pizza chef on board at all times. Excellent work, Jenkins. If you're going to fly in style, I say, said Joe, looking around in awe. Well, quite, Jenkins said. We shall arrive in comfort and refreshed. Mum, are you doing anything tomorrow? You know, once we're back from the summit, Joe asked. I thought I'd dust down the park warden outfit, ready for the grand opening tomorrow. If you manage to avert World War III today, that is, she replied. Well, I have a surprise for you. I'd really like you to be the guest of honour and cut the ribbon at the park opening. Sorry. Oh, darling, are you sure? I mean, me, Joe's mum asked. Yeah, after all, you are the chief park warden. That place wouldn't be half as good if it wasn't for you. Joe's mum beamed. I can't believe it. You really are the best Prime Minister a mother could have. Ha, my pleasure, Mum, my pleasure, Joe chuckled. We're going to get our park back. I'm so happy I could do a somersault, AJ said. You totally should. 5 hours later, they landed in West Transylvania Airport. Everyone emerged from the plane slightly green and walking with a wobble, all except AJ. I can't believe the captain let me fly the plane. What a guy. You should have seen his face when I did the first somersault. He was red with pride. Joe shook his head. He hadn't got the strength to talk and feared that opening his mouth would result in instant projectile vomiting anyway. He was certain of one thing, though. AJ must never be allowed to control anything bigger than a remote-controlled car from now on. He was fairly sure he'd caught Jenkins sucking his thumb and praying at one point. There was a car waiting for them on the runway. It was a big limousine that stretched out almost to the horizon with flags on the front. They zipped through the streets like lightning before the limo pulled up outside a big Gothic-looking building. "Oh, how much do we owe you?" Mum shouted at the soundproof glass. "How much do we owe you?" "Mum, this isn't a taxi. We don't have to pay for it," Joe told her. "That's right, Jenkins, isn't it?" "Yes, of course." This is a long chapter. "Yes, of course." Joe and his mini entourage got out of the car and walked up to the entrance. Press from all over the world snapping cameras at them as they entered the summit building. It was a grand place filled with marble walkways and huge, important-looking meeting rooms. Leaders from all over the world had joined the summit to do whatever they could to avert war. "Jenkins," Joe whispered, "I'm nervous." "Sir, you're here for a reason. You are the Prime Minister. Think about what got you here. A desire to do the right thing. You're a good person. The world is waiting, Prime Minister." Jenkins smiled. "Thanks, Jenksy." Joe took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the summit room. There were people everywhere, and they all had earpieces in. Joe was given his own and realized that it translated what anyone was saying. Into your own language. Either that, or it was to listen to the football scores. "And now let's hear from the British Prime Minister. See if he can sort this mess out," said the President of East Transylvania, gesturing for Joe to step up to the podium. The room fell silent, and Joe could hear his own heartbeat thumping loudly in his ears. This was it. There was no going back now. The world was waiting. Joe cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone. "Good afternoon, the world. My name's Joe. The entire planet is watching us today. Speaking of which, I have a special mention for AJ's nan in Mumbai. He says hi, and he hopes the cream cleared your rash up." "That saved me £5 in phone charges," AJ winked at Jenkins from the back of the room. "Where was I? Oh, yes. The planet is watching and hoping that we can sort this out. So let's not let them down. War. Let's be honest. War is rubbish, isn't it? I mean, yes. We all love to dress up like soldiers and march around with medals on our chests when we're little. In fact, I can see a few of you sat there now who clearly still do. But there's more to war than dressing up and having a bit of a stomp and a yell. There's all the killing for a start, and the cost paintballing is really expensive. So crikey knows how much a war costs. Everyone always wants the latest gun, so the other country won't laugh at you. All in war is pretty rubbish. All in all, war is pretty rubbish." There were a few approving nods from the audience. "All those in favour of war being rubbish, raise your hands." Joe looked out across the crowd. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, just as I thought. Loads, really loads. So the question is, what are we going to do about stopping another one? They started it. Joe looked over to see who it was, and fortunately everyone had their name and country written on a badge at their desk. It was the President of East Transylvania. The President of West Transylvania jumped up. "No, they did. They stole our mountain, and we wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for you putting silly ideas into their heads," the President said, pointing an accusing finger at Joe. Everyone started shouting at each other, and within seconds, half the room was caterwauling at the other half. It was total mayhem. "If you'll excuse me, I hadn't finished," Joe yelled, forcing the room to quieten down again. "I didn't tell anyone to invade anywhere. All I wanted was for people to stop being so serious and have a bit of fun. I was having fun. I find invading really good fun," the President of East Transylvania explains. "Invading isn't fun. Going down a twizzly slide so fast you feel like you need a wee is fun." And there they are, the two presidents. "Popping bubble wrap is fun. Invading is bad, and you know it," Joe said sternly. "Let me get this straight. There's a mountain you both want, and you both think that it belongs to you. Am I right?" "Yes," both men muttered. "Well, then it's simple. Neither of you should have it." "What?" both presidents yelled at the same time. "If you both can't play nicely, then neither of you should have the mountain. He can have it," Joe cried, pointing randomly into the crowd of leaders. The King of Mongolia looked up, startled. "I can have what?" he said. taking his earphones off. Weren't you listening? Joe asked, a bit annoyed. Yes, but to the football scores. What's the score? The Italian Prime Minister asked. 2-1 to Newcastle United. It's so typical. My team always lose, the Italian Prime Minister sighed, waving his arms about a bit. Do you know the baseball score too? The American president joined in. The rest of the room sighed and tutted. Always with the baseball scores. Why don't you like football like everyone else? It makes me so sad, the Italian Prime Minister said, shrugging his shoulders. Can we get back to business, please? Joe bellowed. If you two can't agree whose mountain it is, then the simple solution is that neither of you have it, and that guy gets to keep it. But what if I don't want it? The King of Mongolia said. To be honest, I already have quite a lot of mountains. I'm not sure where I'd put it. Oh, don't worry, it's not a big mountain, more of a big hillock, the president of East Transylvania replied. Yeah, it's pretty tiny, really, the president of West Transylvania agreed. We just call it the mountain because it's the only one we have. Joe rolled his eyes in frustration. We're not actually going to move the mountain, you great nincompoops. He just gets to say it's his. I don't know, he could perhaps name it or stick a flag on it or something. Jemima, the King of Mongolia said, smiling. What? Joe asked. I'd like to call it Jemima. The mountain, I mean. I thought you didn't want it, said Joe, feeling more confused by the second. Well, maybe I do now, especially if I can call it Jemima. I don't like Jemima, said the president of East Transylvania. No, nor me. Can't we just keep the name it has now, said the president of West Transylvania. Well, what's it called now? Joe asked impatiently. Mount Lovely, both presidents replied. Ah, the whole room cooed. Yeah, it is lovely, said the president of East Transylvania. Well, I don't know, said Joe. I mean, it could be called Mount Lovely if you like, but that would mean learning to share. Can you learn to share it? Joe asked earnestly. The president of West Transylvania consulted with his advisor. We could have it Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you could have it Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. The other president consulted with his team. I can't do Tuesdays. I have Zumba that night. Could we swap Tuesdays for Mondays? Yeah, okay. What about Sundays? Sundays, I could have it and call it Jemima. Oh, go on, the King of Mongolia pleaded. The president of East and West Transylvania whispered something to each other. All right, but promise you'll take care of it, the West Transylvania president offered. Yeah, it is lovely after all, the president of East Transylvania chipped in. Of course. Why don't you two come over for a picnic on it or something on Sunday? We can have sandwiches and a game of frisbee. Okay, you see, that wasn't so hard now, was it? War avoided. Picnic arranged. We've called a mountain Jemima one day a week. Joe smiled, checking his watch. And I reckon we can still make the second half of the football. The room burst into applause. Joe had done it. He'd actually done it. Jenkins looked utterly speechless for once, and AJ ran over and gave Joe a big hug. Sorry, just a hug. It was nice, but a bit awkward. Joe had never been hugged by AJ before. Mum came over and gave him a kiss and a squeeze, which was even more embarrassing in front of his new friends. Well done, son. I knew you could do it. Excellent use of the if you can't play nicely, then you don't play at all tactic, Mum smiled. Well, I learnt from the master. Jenkins walked over, a look of shock still on his face. I know what you're going to say. That was a stupid thing to do, to be so risky, but it was brilliant, Jenkins said, laughing. Oh, I didn't know you were going to say that. It was pure brilliance, Prime Minister. You did it. You actually did it. And for the first time since Joe had come to office, a huge grin beamed across Jenkins's face. It was the first time Joe felt as though he'd done some good in the world. Yeah, he'd made people smile, but this was important. He'd actually stopped a war. And that leaves us on chapter 13. Whoa! Joe is really settling into his role, and he actually is being a very good Prime Minister. What do you think of Joe? Do you like the choices he's made? Are you proud of him? If I was his mum, I'd feel very proud of him. Right, I will see you on Monday for chapter 13. See you then.